name is Joey Mascarenhas from the Yoga Place, and we have here with us Nima Riahi. Welcome, Nima.
Thank you, Joey. Nice to be here.
Nice to be here with you too. Could you please tell us something about yourself before we start with our talk?
Certainly, yeah. Well, maybe fitting to the topic today, I was trained as a physicist originally, and I always was fascinated by, I think, the skies and the stars, and that's what attracted me to that. So after that training, I remained in the field, so to speak. I was dealing with a lot of sensor data, signal processing was a topic, and also in the later years, data analysis. So data, sensors, stuff we measure, that's always been with me for a long time. And today I'm a statistics lecturer and a machine learning lecturer at the Zurich Hochschule für angewandte Wissenschaften.
Can you tell us that in English, please? For our viewers who
the Zurich School. English. Yes, that's the Zurich School of Applied Sciences.
Zurich School of Applied Sciences.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So today we have the topic spirituality as a path to inner transformation versus science as a means for better living. Okay, and we have put together some inputs and some thoughts, and mostly we are just free flowing with our thoughts, right?
Sounds good.
Sounds good, yes. And I would like to ask you for your opinion, because I know you personally as someone who meditates and practices yoga, and also a very qualified and learned scientist, physicist in your own field.
Yeah.
So, what is your opinion of science as what science is? And then I would like to ask you, what is your opinion of spirituality, and what brought you to spirituality, to yoga, to meditation? Being someone who has, as I know you personally also, has a very analytical mind, and
for sure,
and someone who really likes proof, and what brings you to combine both these fields?
Mm-hmm.
You can first tell us about science,
the science
part of it, and then the spiritual part of it.
The question being what I consider science to be, is that the initial question?
Mm-hmm.
I think science, the way we live it today in society and practice it and interpret it is really about, I think, observation and measurement and objectivity and reproducibility, and something that's reproducible is, in a sense, by definition, also objective. So I think these are keywords that are very relevant for science, especially the observations. Science originally, also from the historical context, I think was a lot about the senses, being the five senses mostly, the interface that we as human beings have to the outside world. I'd say it started in the last 400 years or so, roughly, where this emphasis was very strong. So in a sense, science is also about connecting with nature, you could say, through your senses. That's where it all starts. And it builds up on top of that. So it starts with our senses, but it's something that almost gets forgotten, I think, in modern days, because it's a cumulative structure that just expands and renews, and some parts are dead ends, and it just grows as a body of knowledge, or of applied knowledge, I would say. That's how I would characterize science. So once it's grown, it's harder to see where does my perception, like of seeing or of hearing or of smelling, come back, because science very often seems rather dry and very theoretic, or science fiction-y sometimes. We have these huge machineries, big sensors, and there's like theories, and you can't tell where my sense of seeing enters the whole picture. But that's the foundation, I'd say, of one of the essential foundations of science is perception and senses.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, this makes very much.
Because I think that matters.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yes. Yes.
today.
So, what really attracted you to the other side of things? I don't know if I'm putting it correctly, but what attracted you to the spiritual part of it?
I have to.
As I see, you have mentioned about the focus and the importance of senses when it comes to the importance. I would like to call it what exists in the three-dimensional world. But even though it is so much, there's so much of importance in the three-dimensional world, we see with quantum science now we are moving beyond these three dimensions, right? We are moving, we are forced to see beyond, because it's like we have, when it comes to the senses, when it comes to matter, we know 90%, as one scientist said, but when it comes to dark matter, we know nothing about it, and there is still a search, and some call it some say there are multi-dimensional spheres. And was that something that attracted you towards spirituality, or was it?
I have to say, well, that's an interesting thing you're raising a point about the new phenomena of quantum effects and new theories like from the last century and now that involve higher dimensions. But that wasn't what attracted me to seek out something beyond the way I understood science so far. For me, it was a more personal experience, personal story based on my life, which I think it's fair to say it started with a strong belief on my side that ultimately there are like fundamental rules that govern reality itself, including me. Like everything is sort of governed by some rule, which is a very sciencey mindset to have. I think I was not so untypical also with this. Maybe the strength of my belief in it was untypical, which also led me to a new path then, or led me to discover for myself the spiritual path more. Now what I mean by that it's, I believed strongly also maybe in this reductionist way that you can explain everything with smaller and smaller entities, like more fundamental laws, so to say. And I didn't even notice that considering the concept of a law was a little strange, but that was just a strong belief. It's like you don't see the forest when you don't see the forest when you're among the trees. Like, and that was the thing that I was carrying with me, lawfulness of nature, the belief that you can break down things into smaller parts and understand the whole based on the smaller parts. And well, that didn't help me in my personal life. I realized this is where a personal thing comes. And the fact that I believed in it so strongly connected it to myself. Like if you think these tenets that you're believing in affect everything, so they affect you as well. I'm part of reality. And I think that's where the things broke down. That was one aspect where this doesn't resolve things for me. This doesn't lead me in a direction that I say, okay, I'm evolving and I'm developing. That was one element, I think.
That actually reminds me of what spirituality really means to me and my own practice, because for me, spirituality is a path to inner transformation. And it is like a very simple example would be a person who is a scientist. A scientist would be, let's talk of love, for example. Okay, so scientists would take data, do research, do the math regarding what love is, and collect all that is necessary when it comes to love. Nothing against science, right? So it's just where I see it. And on the other side, you have a person who's experiencing love, who's fallen in love. And this side is the science part of it. For me, this side is spirituality. Coming back to exactly what you spoke of, experiential, and a path to inner transformation where you can know it only by being that yours, by experiencing it yourself. Not to say that a scientist doesn't experience love or like a scientist
Sure,
is not
yeah.
spiritual, but there I would, for me, there I would personally really put a dividing line between science and spirituality. And there are always these discussions happening, I've noticed, where people say like, is spirituality or science, or does science accept spirituality, and but there is very often I see there is one very important factor which is missing, and that is walking the path. And just as one cannot say something about physics without reading the first page of the textbook, right?
Yeah.
So one cannot define spirituality unless one has walked the path, and that is what really needs to be done. And therefore, there will always, I feel, this separation between science and spirituality. So, where do you feel, as a scientist, spirituality is separate, and where do you feel there could be an integration between the two?
Something that I noticed while you were explaining this is, I think one important aspect is the question of, is it individual or not? Is it your personal path or not?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because one thing, which goes back to what I said earlier about objectivity, what it effectively means in the modern scientific disciplines is different people will agree. Sometimes it's referred to as intersubjectivity. Like, can we agree on something out there? Usually it's something out there. I think always it's something out there, which is another important thing about inside and outside.
External science is more external, and spirituality is and the pathway in the transformation. Yes, absolutely.
And when you say walk the path, is if that path is individual for you, then in some sense there's a fundamental limitation. There's a boundary where the way we do science, it cannot penetrate it, because it cannot cope with a situation, in modern days at least, where there is no intersubjectivity. We cannot agree on whether Joey's path is right, because I can't see his path, I can't walk his path, you can walk my path. But that's necessary, because this is what is referred to as reproducibility. So, that path, so who else can confirm what he's described on that path? And you see, the language I use already is about seeing things outside, checking what the other person has said, reported. Very quickly, you always come back to this language of observation and intersubjectivity and different people confirming what other people say. And I think this is inherent in how science works, and may not be applicable to a individual spiritual journey. So if there's some individuality, at least at first, science can't go there. Like, there's no way to scientifically investigate this thing if it is individual.
Okay, that reminds me of a very popular Indian saying, is that to understand a deity, one has to become a deity. So in other words, you have to vibrate at the same frequency of that deity to really know that deity, because it is very experiential.
Yes. Oh, I see another analogy here. Another thing that I didn't mention about science is, again, especially in the modern era, let's say 200-300 years ago, the human being, the scientist, is supposed to extract himself from what is scientifically being studied by that human being. So, in some sense, you can say you're trying to understand the world with a scientific frame, but you're not supposed to have yourself in there. This is considered bad practice, and this is it's gonna make it impure, your analysis. It's gonna affect the appropriateness of your analysis. And in that sense, you cannot become that deity. You cannot be part of the world you're studying.
There is an element of separatedness.
Yes, you need to separate yourself. You need to be the outside
observer,
or the outside actor and then observer. Like, depending on whether you're doing active experiments or just observational studies, you are supposed to be not part of it. And now what you said about the deity, what was the saying again?
Yeah, the
in order
saying was, in order to understand the deity,
Yeah,
you have to become the deity.
So take that one to
You have to be at the
onto-
same frequency, the same vibration. Yeah.
So I could say that the analogous sentence, in order to understand the world, you have to become the world. Now that just doesn't vibe well with the way science is done. You're interacting with the world. You don't become the world. Typically, in the scientific endeavor, when there are scientific investigations going on, you're trying to extract yourself out of the world, so that you're really describing and understanding the world, except yourself in it, like without yourself in it. You're not becoming that deity using the analogous language. You're staying separate from the deity. So that's what it reminded me of when you said, in order to understand a deity, you have to become it. And again, this might point to a limitation where spirituality and science are not aligned today, or not close today, or don't touch. Because science doesn't want to be part of the scientist should not be part of the reality he or she is studying. Yeah. Where also I think the quantum revolution was a blow to this view that I am separate and
I did not know that. Okay.
Yes, yeah, and still today it's not understood. Like the human beings that are dealing with this problem and trying to understand it, the quantum phenomena, they're still grappling with what to make of it. Like, if the fact that I am observing affects the observation, that goes against this idea that I separate myself and I study this object or the world or reality. In some sense, it was a reminder, you could also say, coming out of the scientific enterprise, that you are not outside of what you're studying. The act of measuring, your intention of measuring perhaps, it gets very confusing for a classical scientific mind. Your intention will affect maybe what comes out. So this was anathema, no-go. Like, what does my intention have to do with the thing I'm studying? I'm outside. That doesn't work anymore. Or it's not clear whether this is consistent with what we're observing. It's confusing, I would say, at least to many scientists.
Yeah. Okay. Coming to belief, I feel sometimes when I watch scientific theories, and I like to read things about science, I notice that there is belief also in the scientific field.
Mm-hmm.
And among scientists, even though they say they are so much, because you used the word belief some time ago, because, for example, when nothing against agnosticism or against atheism.
Yeah.
Excuse my pronunciations. But when an atheist says, I do not believe, it is still a belief, because you really do not know. So is there in science definite proof that something doesn't really exist after death? Coming back, I want to come to this topic. I just want to throw some light on this topic, because if you go on the internet, there is a lot of talk, and there are two conflicting opinions, like very sharp, in terms of videos, in terms of comments. Is there some light that you can share? Where is there something in some way that can take us to understand this side of the aspect that is life beyond life?
Well, maybe I could comment from a perspective of someone who understands what the basic principles and the mindset behind a scientific worldview is, and I'd say it's hard to have an actual proof of something. I think that's also relatively widely accepted by many scientists. You can't positively prove something conclusively. There's this one philosopher of science, very famous also, called Karl Popper, famous in certain circles, where the idea he introduced or he described was that you cannot prove something, but you can just wait and see whether it can be disproven positive, like clearly. And that's how you progress, not by knowing what is really true, but by sorting out what is not true. Which says a lot about the scientific mindset, I think, in modern times as well. Sort of a skepticism towards proof, actually. Although a lot of scientists would ask for proof, or a lot of skeptics ask for proof, but there's an inherent uneasiness with proof, I think, in science. And maybe scientists are not very honest about it sometimes. Like with a split personality, you ask for proof, yet you don't trust proofs, and you say, okay, this proof is better, which is, I think, what psychologically often drives skeptics. There's a belief in certain things, and then that is given, and then there's a strong desire for disproving things, because that's where you feel more comfortable. Proving is such a hard business. Disproving seems easier. That's my explanation. It's my personal explanation. Psychologically drives very intense skeptics.
Because on one side you have like the very religious, and again I have nothing against anyone, but religious-minded, and this side you have the extreme skeptics. Okay, we all live in a similar world, and the world offers us everything without any distinction. But both sides are beliefs, right? Both sides are beliefs, because
I agree with that.
The super religious cannot say that, okay, I step out of my body and here there is somebody waiting for me. But this side, an atheist cannot say for sure that there is a saying, that once an atheist said, well, before dying, said, oh God, if there is one, save my soul if I have one. Okay, so you really do not know. You do not know both ways. You do not know. So therefore comes the whole spiritual approach of direct experience, because for example, if when a person is say grows up to be a teenager, and once a person is 18, I like to use love is a very integral part of spirituality, and examples of love connecting with spirituality. Once a person is 18, I've noticed this 40 years in meditation and being on the path to spirituality, I've noticed this. Once a person is 18, the person goes out there to find love. This individual is not interested. I don't know about you, but me definitely not interested if love is scientifically proven, right? You just go out there, you're ready, you want to fall in love. And today I see this in countries which are materialistically really well off. Like here we are speaking in Zurich, and Zurich is,
as a rule, we're well off here.
One of the most best cities to live in. But there is a strong spiritual revolution over here. There is so much of yoga, there is so much of meditation, there is so much going on over here. Like you would say, like California or certain parts of the world, which people are really doing really well. And I feel like I feel that people, souls, or beings, or consciousnesses, or essence, or whatever you like to call, when they reach a stage where the inner development is that maybe of a teenager, where it's time to go and experience something deeper. They don't really care if something is proven or not, because spirituality is the path to inner transformation and direct experience, and they just come out there and they just go there. So do you think that is a good message for those who think like, okay, maybe something exists, something doesn't exist, just to be that teenager, to go out and try something and see for yourself. Maybe it doesn't work out for you.
Try. When you say just go out there and try, I would like, the second part of the sentence that I hear is just have faith and do it, right?
Okay, there what faith would make sense,
like very often this goes together. Like
that goes together.
Don't think too much, or don't overanalyze, or don't, like, just have faith. And you asked about beliefs, right? Which is belief and faith. I think these things we're talking about some related topics here. Because I think I agree with what you said earlier, that whether you're an atheist, an agnostic, or a scientist, or a strong believer, or an orthodox, there's always belief.
There's always belief.
Yeah.
There is always
Colloquially, we
yeah.
might associate with the religious person belief, but we delude ourselves if we don't think that we believe some things.
Yeah, also
The
with certain areas in science, like there is a belief that this system will work, like string theory, and we
Yeah.
tried for several years
Yeah.
and don't have much of a breakthrough, but
Yeah.
you believe that there is something over there.
There's this is a little tangential, but the mere fact that scientists are involved in the practice of science is a belief element, has a belief element in it. Like, why would you care about science? There's this one bishop in California who, I've heard it from him, but I think he was like phrasing Thomas from Aquinas or something about the belief
I know
that, which is a Christian belief, or
Yes,
at least in that theology
yeah.
is there, the belief that the world out there, reality, is intelligible for us human beings. Now, this is something all scientists, most of them, I guess, if grilled and asked, they would agree to that belief. They believe that reality is intelligible in some way to them. And there's no foundation for that. You could argue empirically, well, we're surviving well, that must be an indicator, but it's just an indicator. That's for sure no proof that nature and the reality is intelligible for us. By that I mean that we can actually understand truths about nature and the world and reality. That's a belief. And it's so obvious a belief that most scientists wouldn't think that that's a belief, but it is a belief. They couldn't prove it. They could point to a body of evidence and interconnected theories that work pretty well, that seem so consistent, and look, we have nuclear energy, and that came out of that kind of thinking and theory. But that's just that's some evidence, but it's not a proof. It's not a conclusive proof. Ultimately, you need to believe that you can understand the world, and we don't know if it's true. We don't know if it's complete. And science again is very much based on the five senses. These five senses, where did they come from? According to a modern viewpoint, scientific viewpoint, it's a result of evolutionary development of the human being to this point where we are today. And so the five senses seem to have been valuable in this, or functionally useful in this evolutionary path of us as a species. Now, why would that just is survival, right? That ensures
survival, yeah.
that based on an evolutionary principle, well, we're here today, so there's a survivorship information. So that's where the five senses can be interpreted from. Why would those five senses be sufficient to understand the structure of reality? Why would it? It's not, for sure, it's reasonable by logic to say it's useful for survival. That's how evolutionary theory is very often interpreted. But is it going to get you to understand the depths of reality? So when science tries to go beyond providing theories and practical entities for survivorship, like technologies that come out of science, our cell phones, the way we produce energy, the way we transmit energy, how we build things, let's call that survival things that are practical for our well-being on the planet. But science can try to go beyond it, like cosmologically. In one of our earlier conversations, you mentioned black holes, for instance, that their science tries to learn and say something about entities that are beyond our reach. And that's where there's a lot of leap of faith happening, that what we experience, what helps our survival, which is understandable from the basic senses that we're having, and that's where science is built on originally. Now you're going to go somewhere where it's beyond our senses, and it's very speculative and extrapolating. You're going outside. I think that's where there's a lot of faith involved.
There is a very ancient saying, and this is in the Upanishads, the Chandrika Upanishad, and it says that you cannot understand Brahman, that is the supreme being, with your intellect. And this is a very vital point, because we have I love scientists. I love science. I When I wake up in the morning and I take my vitamins and I turn on the water cooker to make my lupinen coffee, and
Yeah.
when I take when I take the train
Yeah.
to the studio. We love our normal days. When I go to the doctor, I see science in every aspect of my life, and I see it how brilliant
I
the
agree,
last
yeah.
150
Yeah.
years has been, and has brought so much to the world. Okay, which is spiritual. We come back to that in a second.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, but when someone is so brilliant and knows so much and about dark matter, and you just spoke about the black hole, and then you see these guys who cross their legs and keep their eyes shut, and they say, we have experienced much beyond. And here is a very, I think this is a very important quote over here in the Chandrika Upanishad that makes us aware that we have the intellect, we have intelligence in terms of the connected with the five senses and understanding the three-dimensional world that we live in. But you really don't need the intellect when it comes to inner transformation, when it comes to having a very deep spiritual experience or experiencing the beyond. Because all along spirituality has said that actually you have to go beyond the five senses. And before you have spoken at length now about how science is so involved in the five senses, and how
It's based on the five
based
senses. I
on the
would
five
say,
senses,
yeah,
and
to a large degree.
how it has brought convenience to us, it has brought better life quality to us. But for spirituality, we have to move beyond the senses. So if we have to move beyond the senses, and if it is a part of inner transformation, then whether we live in an iron age or stone age, or whether we are living today, shouldn't really matter so much, right? Because it is
I see that.
it is a different, it's a total different path altogether. And that is why when we, like today, yoga is yog, as we call it in India, is so popular all around the world. But it comes at a time when we were not so progressive. At least we don't know if we were so technologically progressive. Yet there are stories, there are books at the time of Gautam Buddha and Patanjali and all of them, where the spiritual inspiration they have given us, the knowledge they've given us, the wisdom that has been passed through is applicable today. And all those who are on the spiritual path are using this knowledge, this wisdom to reform our present spiritual journey, which has been put down thousands of years ago, where there was absolutely no at least that we know, scientific progress. So coming back to again that same sentence, that yes, science makes our world a better place, but spirituality makes us a better person.
Oh, you're making this distinction of world and us as a person.
As a person, yes.
A recurring theme.
Yes,
Science looking at the world, taking the person out of it, dealing with the outside reality, and then there's the inside reality.
The inside reality as a
personal journey.
Personal journey.
Yeah.
What do you feel about this, and where do you think you could where do you think there could be a connection or separation, or what was your experience when it comes to your own personal meditation and your own learning experience?
I have a feeling that science, the way we know it today, is inherently about the outside. Like the planets food creation, technologies, everything is on the outside world, very much focused. Even when it's about our inner workings, like can you see people's thoughts? Again, it's on the outside. They measure stuff with an instrument, and the human being measured and subjected to the scrutiny is considered like an object, like the way science deals with things. It looks like a material thing. Modern science is materialistic mostly. I like the mindset of the modern scientists, I would say. So it's always outside. The person investigating doesn't look inside. Like if they say, oh, let's study Joey's brain while he's meditating in a functional MRI, the person looking at it or the person operating it, they don't go inside, they're looking outside at Joey, like you, in a meditative state maybe. And there's been some experiments also in the realm of, I think...
Could you tell us something about it? It would be really interesting.
Oh, I don't know too much about it. I just know meditation has been studied with fMRI, like functional magnetic resonance imaging, where they try to see, essentially it's activity in the brain. Create images of activity in the brain and how it changes while people are doing like yogic practices or meditation.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's an attempt to use very modern technology and scientific methods to understand what at least touches spirituality or out of the five sense activities. And my personal opinion is that it's not going to get to the core of things. It's going to provide a superficial worldly description of a phenomenon that may be, otherworldly, like if the cross-legged person, closed eyes, that experiences certain things. These things may just not be accessible with the tools we're having, the scientific tools, because they are built on the five senses. So in some sense, they inherit the limitation also of the five senses. And is there anything beyond the five senses? Again, we don't have proof that there is not. This is the belief, I'd say, of most scientists, or, well, I shouldn't speak for most scientists, but this is what I see in the modern scientific enterprise, that, well, the five senses is the solid foundation based on which we will pretty exclusively allow ourselves statements about the world. Not statements about themselves, because I think most scientists are aware they will not have science dictate what they're doing. This was also my story. You will not orient yourself exclusively on just scientific theories when it's about yourself, because every human being realizes it doesn't work at some point. If you wait too long, it's not gonna
that's
work
a very
well.
good point. Yes, absolutely.
So why do scientists do what they're doing? The why doesn't come from science. Somehow they're fascinated.
The why doesn't come from science.
Not at all. So the thing that they're using, the methodology they believe in, is not the thing that drives them to do these things, to use this methodology. They have a belief in the methodology of objectivity, intersubjectivity, measurability, trusting the senses and making sure, comparing notes, different people agree on these things. They believe in that process. But ultimately, it's not going to provide some answers certain on a personal level. What should I do in this life? Which is a very fundamental question for every scientist, I'd say, and for every human being, but specifically also for every scientist. That question is not addressed by science. And sometimes I think in the public discourse, there's the idea of have science guide you, take scientifically sound advice on what to do and decide for yourself. But I would caution people to take that too seriously, because this is not about finding out what the atomic structure of matter is, something for which modern science has been sort of well positioned because it was looking outside. It's about an inside view now. And science is not adept. I'd say it's like not even 18 years old. It's like an immature or not an appropriate methodology for the inside questions. Which, on a personal note, is what, me saying this would make clear why I became more aware and interested and to following the more spiritual, to discover spirituality also more for myself.
So you've got for yourself the best of both the worlds.
Yeah.
The inner world and the outer world.
I think I don't know. Yeah, the best of both worlds for sure. You need both in a sense. You asked before, what can they come closer or
Can they
are
come
they
closer? Yeah.
And I see it right now as two elements of the human experience. Science, let's abbreviate it, is about survival and the world out there, and spirituality is about the world inside. That's how I see it today, at least.
Yes,
Your
absolutely,
thoughts about that would be
absolutely. Yes,
interesting.
yeah. Because for me, I would look at the, not to say that the science is not spiritual. I would look at it that a scientist is collecting data and experimenting and proving, and it is so important, so vital, and this has made our world so such a good place. Sure, there have been other issues with environment and all that, which I'm very concerned about. But for a spiritual person, it would be experiencing that love, as we spoke about. Now, today in the world today, everyone accepts that love is a common factor, that everybody experiences love. But if in society love would not be accepted, then how would science prove that love exists? Would science say, okay, it is a few hormones, it is a need, it is a pleasure? How would one experience? How would one explain love for humanity, for those who are downtrodden, those who are in need? How would one explain love for one's family?
Yeah.
Because yes, you can say hormones and everything with romantic love, but how would one explain love for one's family? We know sometimes when we are with our family, we maybe want to run away from them, but we love them, so we are there. And how would one explain that love? It is not measurable. So I think spirituality moves beyond measurability, because spirituality moves beyond the three-dimensional laws and moves beyond, moves into direct experience. And just as love cannot really be explained, if somebody has not experienced love, just cannot be explained. It can be so many, there are millions of poems and songs and books and everything written about it, but the experience one knows only when one experiences it. That's where I really like to connect spirituality to.
Yes.
Coming to that point, I'd like to ask you what your opinion would be when it comes to, very often people try to use scientists. Okay, I don't want to be critical about this, to say whether they believed in something, an afterlife, or they believed in a God, or they did not believe, to use them as a support to say that something exists or something doesn't exist. And I'd like to first just give my opinion about it, and then I would like to ask you. And I find that a little ridiculous, because to really think about it, look at the work that the scientist has done for humanity, and the transformation that the scientist has brought for humanity. So it is regardless sometimes what a person believes, because again, it is the path to inner transformation. So a scientist has spent her entire life inventing something, discovering something that would elevate the suffering for humanity and made the world a better place. Like say medicine, for example, and transport, or so many things. So it is not at all important what that person believed in, because if there is an afterlife, I don't think the guys on the other side will say, hey, you did so much of good, but you didn't believe in us, go away. I don't see any rational over there. So it is what the person has done for humanity that speaks.
interesting.
Compared to on the
distinction.
other
Yeah.
side, compared to the other side, somebody says, "Hey, I'm so spiritual. I'm such a nice, such a spiritual person. I
Yeah.
do my yoga. I cross my legs and sit every day." It does nothing.
Yeah.
There's nothing for humanity. There's nothing for somebody. There's nothing. Just thinks that okay, now I can sit in meditation and I can close my eyes and experience an inner peace.
Yeah.
And
Are you
that's-
saying that being spiritual is more a thing about what you do
and not what you
rather
say?
than what you say and believe?
Absolutely,
or
absolutely.
theories
Because
you hold
again, it's a
about?
path. It's a
It's a
path.
path, and yeah.
It's a path.
Yeah. And if you mentioned the Upanishad, something where the Brahman not accessible through the
Intellect.
which when you take the intellect out of the equation, what remains is what you do, right? Not
Yeah.
what you say, because words and language is closely related to thinking and thought, and the intellect is the driver and producer of thought.
Yeah, it's the vehicle to.
So what you think, what
yeah.
you believe, what your theories, this all would not matter. That's based also on what is there in the Upanishad. And it's an interesting way of, let's say, define it, to use a scientific word, define spirituality is what you do. Because a lot of human beings would then, by this definition, be spiritual, depending on
Absolutely.
the good they bring into
Absolutely.
the world. Also, a scientist who says,
Absolutely.
I'm an atheist, or whatever he believes, maybe he believes himself to be an atheist, but he may be spiritual.
Yes, absolutely.
If what he does
Absolutely.
is born out of actual care of improving
Yeah.
the development of human beings, or at least reducing suffering maybe in the world.
Yeah.
That is a very fascinating definition of spirituality.
Yeah. In fact, our perspectives have to change, and our definition have to change, and the way we look at it has to change, and we have to stop institutionalizing things and creating separation. Rather work in unity, where one says, okay, now I'm a scientist and anything say spiritual or religious and doesn't apply to me. But as a scientist, I'm doing so much of spiritual work myself, and I fail to see it.
Right?
I fail to see it.
Yeah.
But then there, on the other side, you have somebody says that, well, I'm very spiritual, not to be critical about anyone. But I'm very spiritual, but I really don't do anything.
Yeah, it's like you
I'm
cannot
being very strong in my statements, but just to
but
put
it
things
jives
clear on the
right.
table.
Like I have in everyday experience, everybody would say we know the type of peoples who on the outside should be expected to be spiritual, like let's say some priests or people who chose a certain path visibly from the outside. But we know it doesn't sound right, they don't seem spiritual. Like when you think of it's a tough topic, but the abuses in the church, for instance. And that's an extreme case, but not every priest and every official of the church is believed by most people to be on an equal spiritual path.
Yeah.
We know that on this side it's not true. So the same thing applies for scientists. Like not every scientist is on an anti-spiritual path and believes only like in the material world. And like you can't tell from outside appearances what spirituality is. You can only tell by the acts that are done.
Yeah, because yes, exactly, that's true. But at the same time, I think before we started the video, some days ago, we discussed about this, and you mentioned this to me that the scientist would miss the inner transformation path, which he could walk himself or herself, because the scientist would be so focused on humanity, and the scientist would not accept this by definition, the spirituality concept and the direct experience of something beyond the senses. So there, the scientist would miss out on things, but yet the scientist is very spiritual. And this brings me to a very nice quote again by the Dalai Lama, the present Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama. And he says, well, nirvana, yes, people have experience. But in truth, what we really need, what we really require is nirvana of society. And in our society, we have people who are really working for on one side of the spectrum for the benefit of humanity,
Yeah.
whichever way, some may be known, some may be not known,
Yeah.
in every way. And on the other side, we have those who maybe who just live our lives. Yes, of course, we also have to live our lives. So to bring nirvana to in the society, we would need to reach more a certain area on the graph, you could say. So on the tangent where we are really bringing this difference to, so say at the moment, to environment and to life quality, as in not material life quality, but inner life quality with our emotions and the way we are as a person, treating ourselves. So we do need to bring that integration, and that integration can happen, I think, only when one looks into the other side and looks from all sides. And
By other side, you mean like the inside, or
yeah,
other side,
the scientist will
other
have to
person?
look in the spiritual side.
Yes.
The one who's spiritual will
Yeah.
have to look in
Yeah.
how to use science and accept science
Yeah.
and integrate it for the benefit of
Yes.
humanity, for the benefit
Yeah.
of all.
Yeah.
Because
Yes, because there is
Because
benefit
we are one,
for humanity
right?
in science. That's no doubt, as you mentioned, right? The water cooker, the vitamins, the transportation, for sure. Yeah, it shouldn't be discarded from a purely spiritual perspective that science has brought something for mankind.
do you think conditioning stops progress? For example, in the world we live in today,
Yeah.
we are very much technology oriented, we are competitive, and we are more practical, analytical, and these sometimes I think belief is something which is also very trendy. So the type
Yeah.
of society we live in makes us follow a certain pattern of living, and that brings in a certain trend. And trend is good, and belief is good because it gives us a type of acceptance in society. It does give us acceptance in
Yeah.
society
Yeah.
and integrates us.
Integrates us, yeah.
With this has been always been proven culturally over eons. It integrates us and gives us a sense of belonging, and that's why if there is a certain outfit, we wear it because it makes us belong to society, or we buy certain devices and we have them around and with us because they make us belong to society and gives us a certain level of even self-esteem, in fact. So
an identity.
An identity, that would be a better word, an identity. Yeah. But scientifically, sometimes maybe conditioning prevents growth. And I remember you once speaking, saying to me when we were having a chat that ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. What was the context of that? I'm trying to.
The context is that if you think you already know, then you are the chances of you knowing more is quite less.
Yeah. Yes. In a sense, it also relates to one could say conditioning is related to belief, because what is a belief? Whatever happens, you will explore and evaluate based on your beliefs. So you're scientifically, mathematically speaking, you would say you condition what is being observed and sensed by you based on your beliefs. It's a kind of conditioning. It's the actual mathematical scientific act very often is referred to as conditioning. It's a technical term in science, yeah. So you condition, and that is considered valuable because without conditioning, too much is possible. It's hard to learn something, and you can also make mistakes and misinterpret. You have to condition. But the flip side of this thing is conditioning limits the scope of things you could possibly see, which is again something almost mathematical. And and maybe not appreciated enough, that conditioning limits what can be seen, and on a very technical level, but also in a more spiritual level, maybe on a personal level. The more conditioning you have, the less you can see things unconditionally.
Unconditionally,
And
I like
the things
that. Yeah.
don't care about your conditions, because your conditions come from some kind of theory or expectation or belief. Now, reality does not have to abide by your beliefs or your theories. So it's going to be hard to see.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's hard to see reality if you're conditioned. And now to connect it to bliss, unless you're very blissful in your conditioning, if that is not the case, then you won't have access to bliss if it is out there, because your conditioning will exclude it from occurring. That's another way to think of it. Ignorance is bliss is like, if you're not ignorant, if you assume things, if you have conditions and beliefs, that precludes bliss. Maybe that's a way. That's the other way of reading that statement.
Okay.
So for sure, conditioning is restricting.
Conditioning is restricting, is it? And where does it fit in the law of probability?
Oh, yeah.
Because if there is conditioning, there cannot be probability, or can there be?
Again, in a technical sense, a mathematical sense, conditioning is a thing you can do in probability theory. You say, if I condition the probabilities based on that Joey and Nima are sitting here and talking together, this is a given. I condition it based on this having occurred. Now, what's the probability that it's a Monday? This is very
right. Okay.
But there's a way to use the word conditioning in probability theory very consistently. That's not a problem at all. But what if your conditioning was wrong? Then, even if you had a true probability, knowledge of probabilities in the world, if you condition wrongly, you're gonna see, you're gonna have a wrong idea of probabilities. But there's a philosophical component to it as to what are probabilities and what is randomness, and is randomness real, and does it really exist, which is underneath and deeper than just a conversation of probabilities and conditioning. This is a little mathematical, I think. What I'm saying now, maybe the context is not present in there. But
how could you apply mathematics to spirituality? Because there was a spiritual mystic in the last century and in the 1900s who said that people who study mathematics and who are really very deep in mathematics, his name was Rudolf Steiner, and he said are also deeply spiritual, and mathematics is also a method to change spiritual experiences or deepen one's self spiritually. And how would you also relate them to, say, Aristotle and the other scientists who had an Einstein, Descartes? How would you connect them as scientists to spirituality? Not just by what they said or what they believed, but the expression of their life.
Well, there's another scientist, a physicist I'm thinking of now, called Wigner, in the mid-last century, where he published, I think, a paper or wrote an essay talking about something along the lines of the uncanny appropriateness for mathematics to describe the phenomena that physicists and mathematicians and chemists were after. Like, how come mathematics is such, if nothing else, such a useful tool for science to explore reality? Because again, that it wasn't clear that this would be the case. Why is mathematics so useful? Is mathematics describing something deeper about physical reality? That was the question that we're grappling with. I mean, he put this in an essay, he made the question explicit, but it highlighted the questions around mathematics. What is mathematics? Is it really just something intellectual, or is there something deeper to it? And I've heard this Bishop of California, Robert Barron, talk about different planes of existence, or different planes of reality. The physical being the basic, basic plane. And the first plane above it, of transcendence toward something godly, I think is what he was talking about. The first was the world of the ideals and the abstract, which is mathematics. So also in the words of a religious man or a theologian, mathematics had like this distinct role to play. It was not just the physical world. Mathematics is beyond the physical world. And it seems to be useful for the physical world. It seems to describe something about the physical world.
Interesting.
But
Interesting. Very
in this theological view, it was just the first level. There's more levels to come. So I think because mathematics is also a very intellectual thing.
It is, right?
It's
Yes.
very much thinking and logic and thought. And from our conversation, I think it flows, right? That there's this one side of reality and of ourselves, is the senses and our thinking. And then there's something transcendent to that. So mathematics, I don't know to what degree it can talk about the transcendent element. I don't know about that. It's just things that I've heard that somehow place a certain importance to mathematics, but it's not clear to me what role it plays for spiritual development.
Yes,
Certainly.
of course, for spiritual development. But for example, if you check on the internet and on social media, you do see there is this theory of everything. People talking about it, and people speaking of through mathematics. They say there is I don't know whether to call it probability or possibility that there are different dimensions, and this has mathematically been proven. But obviously, if there would be an experience, then it would be spiritual. But
also
there is mathematically, so scientifically, we are seeing a possibility of something beyond the three-dimensional sphere that we live in.
I'm not sure what to think of these things, the higher dimensional, the theories that imply higher dimensions in like theoretical physics. I think one thing they suffer from is that that is criticized, they're hard to pin down to physical experiments, so they cannot be empirically validated to degree. Empirically, which
I love that statement.
Which connects us to senses and the physical world. So but that's a scientific criticism about them, actually. I think that's fair to say. So what do they mean? Ultimately, they are constructions from our intellect. Like the intellect, with some creativity, has come up with a complex mathematical frame that implies dimensions, whatever that means. But mathematically speaking, you call those dimensions. And they may explain some of the physical phenomena. That's what has happened, put in dryly. Now, I'd be a little suspicious to that because it's very much, to a large degree, a product of the intellect, what has come out there. And to what degree that is a good guide. I think the intellect and the senses, these are for survival. If it is relevant for survivalship, then that's a place to look at. The five senses, the mind, logic, intellect. But again, what you mentioned from the Upanishads, I think that Brahman cannot be accessed through the intellect. It is with this in mind that I would be skeptical to interpret too much into these statements of more higher dimensions.
Okay.
This connection of thinking and the inside, I think it's one that I'm skeptical about, again to use a scientific word. And I think in the West, especially through René Descartes, with the statement "I think, therefore I am," that has been so influential in the way we perceive the world, I think, in the way we even think who I am, is that thinking has become so important. And that may have been misleading to some degree, or at least what he has said has misled a lot of people, perhaps, about who they are. Because you have put thinking, what you could arguably consider a survivalship mechanism, into the essence of who you are. I think, therefore I am. If you just take the sentence out of the context you put it and look at it, it seems like this is implied. Your thinking and who you are, they're very closely connected.
Okay.
I think that's the danger of interpreting it this way.
You know, when we try to see what science has done today, we have great personally great respect.
Mhm.
But when we really go back in time, this is very clear that we do not know much of what really happened before the last flood, the last ice age.
Mhm. Mhm.
The last ice age. And if we, the other day I was watching a wonderful documentary on the environment,
Mhm.
which said that we have only 1% of the species alive today.
Mhm.
And the planet after the last ice age was in this omniscene. That is, the temperature did not move higher or below 1 degree.
Mhm.
And now we are going into the
Anthropocene, yeah.
Anthropocene. So before the ice age, we always had these large fluctuations.
Mhm.
Now, when we look at science today and the progress we've made and everything, and science says we are like at the top. But sometimes I feel that we think we are at the top now, but maybe in 100 years we will say we are at the top.
Mhm.
But at the same time, there are signs of certain signs, say of the pyramids, and when you see certain drawings in ancient drawings, and when you look at certain ancient archaeological sites where they have the constellations depicted on stone, and which tells how long, like for example in Turkey, and
Mhm.
which tells when this site was actually
Yeah, yeah.
constructed. You see that there were times when we were also extremely progressive in the past, and definitely it's possible that we were very much progressive before the ice age. So is there some link over here that is there some link that some information that we know that are we just super progressive now, or
Yeah.
is it a different type of a progress that we have
Yeah.
now? And
Yeah.
what's your
It's
view on this?
one comment I'd have is that it's so hard to know much about the deep past because things get lost over time. I think that's what archaeologists are struggling with. It's so hard to get artifacts and knowledge out of the past, and also geologically speaking, over longer time periods at least, our planet is constantly renewing and evolving, like changing. Like there's no reason to believe that, let's say, our world in a million years of now, once we're gone, is going to be seen by whoever's going to be around, or alien civilizations that may show up.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So it's not so permanent. Our world looks so permanent. Certainly you think, look at the ruins, and it's thousands of years and we still see some things. So you mentioned this site in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, which is about that old, 10,000 years or so, where science started to get weaker, and it was actually a later discovery in the 90s, I think, and it's surprised by the sophistication.
Yeah, but there are people who, during these times, say that people did have psychic powers, and sometimes they use psychic powers to. Is there, at the moment, any experiments or by science on whether psychic power exists or not? Because it's so much a gray zone sometimes, and one doesn't really understand it.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that again you wouldn't know from the past, right? If people had psychic powers, there's no way with the way we're looking today that we could know this. So we just don't know. That is guaranteed, I think. The interesting thing is that a psychic phenomena, like so-called psi research, PSI, I'm not sure what it stands for, but it's or sometimes referred to as parapsychology.
Parapsychology, yes.
There's been scientific experiments, and I think scientific is really the right word for it, where they try to measure, and there's ways of measuring it, like in a experimental sense, whether people can foresee the future in some sense. It's called precognition, presentiment. There's different specialized words for different aspects. When you look into it in detail, you see that there's different things you could, different kind of parapsychological phenomena. Now, to my information, the scientific evidence, because it was really looked into in a very scientific way, so the evidence seems to indicate that there is a phenomenon. There are psychic phenomena. I don't know which ones. It was something about presentiment, like some kind of felt experience of what is about to happen in the future.
All right. Yes, I watched videos on that also. Yeah.
And that is actually telling about how science works, I think, because this is done with conventional science. I'm saying in terms of experimental designs that were developed based on science that has been happening in the last 150 years. So based on these experimental designs, it seems conclusive from the literature that the phenomena are real, albeit weak occasionally. Like it's not a very strong thing. But it has also been looked at with our tools today. So yeah, I would say psychic, it's something very intriguing because we're talking about the five senses that are fundamental to modern science. Now, if there are more senses, that's the example, right? We've only looked maybe with a limited interface to reality. So who knows? You asked, was there maybe some kind of advanced technology in the past? This technology may have been psychic. I don't know if technology is the right word, it's a modern word, but what if people were very much beyond? What if they could communicate over long distances, making our smartphones look not so clever and sophisticated anymore? But they didn't do it with material things, but with like inner powers that they were more aware of, or they could own more than we're doing it. For sure, we're not.
It's like
one thing is obvious. We are as a species, we are not developing our psychic powers, and it's obvious. This statement is definitely true because most of the people don't even believe in it. So you're definitely not tuning it and improving it. So, and that is interesting because from a skeptical perspective, it has not been accepted despite the evidence. I mean, there is evidence, but it also shows you how how the human being, the scientist, decides what is evidence and what is not, what is sufficient and what is not. And if something is not according to your worldview or your conditioning, you will have a different view on evidence. You will not accept certain evidence. I would say for psychological reasons. This is my claim now. And not for scientific reasons, because the human being is part of the scientific.
Exactly. For me, I think over here, it is the approach that changes the result. For example, if I say I believe in something, if I believe in spirituality, I believe that there is something maybe say afterlife, or if I believe that there is a psychic phenomenon, then I will go and I will study and I will find methods that help me to develop it.
Yeah.
But if I believe it doesn't exist, then I will find ways to disprove it.
Yeah. Well, you will,
because when it comes to spirituality, it does matter, because you have to really it's a path. So you really have to go into it and do it yourself. So you have to. It is the approach that changes the results.
Yes, I mean the approach, and what is the approach based on? To a large degree, for many people, you're conditioning, and if you're conditioned to not believe in like more than five senses, consciously or unconsciously, then any claim of higher senses is too fundamental a change to accept. You will be motivated to disprove it. Or you would just not be motivated to look into it at all. Like you will never explore this. If you have it in yourself, you will never explore it. And if it is weak or requires looking into with more detail, that's never going to happen, because you will not have the commitment to look into it with dedication. And this is after having read the scientific the literature on the experiments that were done, and they seem to me, also from a statistical perspective, because they're very much about statistics. There's no physical, biological mechanisms that are there we could base that on. So it's purely observational, statistical. And from that sense, they seemed very solid to me and made me wonder to what degree are we not, is another domain of the human existence that we may not be aware of. And for sure, there's anecdotal evidence, at least, that, where people say they can do things, or they can communicate with the afterlife, for example, or they can see stuff that is very far away. All these things, there's reports on it, but it's hard to convince a scientific community if that very community is not interested in investigating. It's sort of, the hen or the egg problem. It's too far away. It's not adjacent to what we are willing to look at as a collective in the scientific discipline. Therefore, it's not clear what path would ever explore it. It's going to remain either unexplored or unbelieved. Not because it's real or not, but because it's too far away from what we are willing to explore as a community, as a whole.
The thing is, if there is light and we close our eyes, doesn't mean there is no light if we close our eyes.
Yes. Yeah.
At the same time, standing with your eyes open in the dark is also not an option.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would like to ask you one last question is, and that is, do you ever see a emergence or a coming together of spirituality and science? Would they be like a science or spiritual, or spiritual science, or sure, spiritual science exists as spiritual science, but the mainstream, do you see a convergence at some point, and what would that be like?
I've been thinking about that the last couple of weeks, and I think my answer would be I don't see that there's going to be a convergence, because it's again like this belief in a fundamental theory that could explain everything. And maybe reality is just context dependent. Is it about ease of living and survival? Science is a good thing to look at. Is it about inner journey and purpose? Then science, the way we understand it today, does not have the tools to offer. So why would there be a convergence? You just have to be very pragmatic, use the methods that are appropriate for the problem you're having, or the thing you're trying to explore. In that sense, I would today say, like, why would they I don't see them converging, but why would they have to converge? Like,
why would they have to converge? Yes.
There's just different.
Because there's a lot of this talk about conversions and all. I thought I would ask you.
Yeah. So I think behind the talk of convergence lies again a belief of some fundamental one truth, which I'm not sure that's the right way of integrating different theories or viewpoints. It's just accepting a diversity of viewpoints. It's going to be closer. It's better to match what reality is from our perspective, and we are limited beings. And what I mean by that is limited. We're a product. We cannot assume that we can know the ultimate reality. This is a personal belief now. Therefore, you don't have to look for convergences. You just have to understand.
Very true.
Very true. You have to be wise in how you interact with the world. Maybe that's a way of putting it.
Yeah. For me, like personally, knowing that there's a black hole out there, or there are black holes, or there are fantastic stars and Milky Ways and galaxies, that would be science, and it's really lovely. I love watching those pictures. But being in the black hole, for me, that would be spiritual. Being on a star,
scientific level, that should be a horror show, being in a black hole, because the gravity differentials apparently
exactly the experience would be the spiritual part of it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Being in a the experiential part. It's
So I'd like to end with another quote, and that is like, one cannot explain. It's a very ancient Indian quote, and one cannot explain an orange unless we eat one. So there is one in Europe also. The proof of the pudding is in tasting the pudding.
Yeah.
And yes, you can really explain the orange and everything about it. And that is we need in everyday life, the carbs and the nutrition and the sugars and everything. But what is it really to eat an orange?
Yeah.
I think that would be very spiritual.
That's a good way. That's a good point to end on. Yeah, that really much captures a lot of what we're talking about, I think.
Thank you, Nima. Wonderful to have this chat with you, and hopefully we can talk some more.
Hopefully,
some new things.
I love this. Yeah.
Have a nice day. This is Joey saying thank you for watching. Namaskar.